Colts and Texans. I haven't planned out my weekend yet in my how I'm watching these games. Third time they've played. So you were talking about this whole. I mean, you were talking about a team that's already won 2. These teams have split. The road teams won both games. But the third matchup for the Texans and Colts this year, that always brings an interesting dynamic to the matchup.
Yeah, and they're also tied in terms of points over the 2 games. So they've each been 3-point win.
And tied in points against.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So essentially they're dead even right now, having taken 1 game to overtime, the road team having won both the encounters. And points for and against, therefore, are entirely evenly split. This is, I think, a fascinating game for 2 reasons. One, because the Colts are still riding this hot streak. Andrew Luck's been really good. The Colts generally have been really good over the back end of the season. They've overcome, one of the worst deficits in NFL history to still make the postseason. And on the flip side of that, you've got the Houston Texans, who I have been expecting to be found out all the way through the season. Maybe this is where it happens.
Maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe this is it. This is one of those tests of the quote-unquote momentum, right? The Colts are both teams are kind of riding pretty good momentum down the stretch, if you believe in such things, playing well down the stretch. The Texans did lose to the Eagles a couple weeks ago, but I'm interested, of course, in the quarterback matchup when you talk about the future of the AFC. And I know Andrew Luck's in, year 7, but, that's not. It's not like he's getting old or anything. He's got 10 more years of quarterback play, assuming he stays healthy again. So we're talking about Andrew Luck, a developing Deshaun Watson in the AFC South. We already know about Patrick Mahomes, Baker Mayfield. I think the AFC is going to have some really unbelievable playoff matchups over the next few years with these quarterbacks. So let's start with Luck and the way things have changed for him this year. New system. New scheme for the first time. And I'm going to go back again to what Zach Robinson the way he likes to describe Andrew Luck. He's so good at progression passing and kind of the complicated aspects of quarterbacking that his entire career, whether it was Bruce Arians, whether it was Rob Chizzinski, whoever's his offensive coordinator, gives him difficult things to do. It's deeper drops, it's survey the field, and he always held the ball a little bit longer. But that was okay because he made special plays down the field. This is the first time, though, Frank Reich trying to get the ball out of his hands. He had 331 throws that lasted less than 2.5 seconds, which is kind of like our cutoff. Is it a quick pass? Is it a longer developing pass? That's by far the most of his career, and he saw the lowest pressure rate of his career by 9%. It's a whole new offense for the Colts this year.
Yeah, the entire Colts offense used to be essentially Andrew Luck can make it happen.
Right.
If we just let him play, give him a deep drop back, ask him to find a guy, he'll do it. And that's all we're going to rely on, which was fine, only it really exposed him to hits. It made life difficult for him because it was all on his shoulders. There was nobody that was sort of as fundamental to the functioning of an offense as Andrew Luck was to this Colts offense. And it ended up getting him broken, essentially. Just subjected him to too many hits, too much punishment. By trying to eke out all the time he had and find a guy and take a hit at the end of it. This season, I think, has been big for his future because it's completely reversed that. They've tried to get the ball out of his hands quicker. They've tried to kind of help him out with the scheme as well as letting him do some of the complicated stuff. And it means he takes less hits now. So he's not subjected to the same level of abuse and physical toil that he was over the past few seasons. And that has to be good for extending his career long term and letting him play. And we've seen that, if you're able to do all the complicated, difficult stuff like he has been, then of course you're going to be able to do the easy stuff as well. And when you actually focus the offense on giving him more of those, you get kind of the best version of Andrew Luck. He's still able to make some special plays every now and again, in particular where you see those kind of late fourth quarter comebacks. But he's also able to play at just a higher level down to down because you're giving him an easier job.
Yeah, he always had a high percentage of turnover-worthy plays, which was the complete opposite of what I expected coming out of Stanford. I thought you were going to see a Peyton Brady type of player who would be good in the quick game, 5-step game, and then, could make those special plays when needed. Instead, it was closer to a Brett Favre high volatile type of game that Luck played for years. So I do think he's settling back in as a more efficient quarterback. He still makes some bad decisions in there. He still had a high number of turnover-worthy plays, but not like what he did years ago. So I do think that's, one of the keys. And then when you look at the offensive line, they don't get all of the credit for Andrew Luck facing, 9% less pressure, but they do get some of it. It's definitely a hybrid effort. Anthony Costanzo, Quentin Nelson. So look, the two rookies, Quentin Nelson at left guard, he was the number 6 guard in the entire NFL. And then rookie right tackle, Braden Smith, the number 27 offensive tackle in the NFL, which is good. There's 64
in the top
stars.
half, yeah.
And Anthony Costanzo. So those two rookies have been fantastic. Costanzo's the number 17 offensive tackle. So you have 3/5 of the offensive line in the top 32, so to speak. So they've improved quite a bit. They've been helped a little bit by the scheme and the quick passing game, but improvement across the board for the Colts has really made that offense tick. Eric Ebron's breakout season, of course, too. So a lot of good things happening for the Colts on the offensive side.
Yeah, and critically, Braden Smith played well when he faced Houston before. So he faced him twice, but he only played 4 snaps the first time because he wasn't a starter yet. When he played them the second time, he gave up a sack, so that's not good, but that was the only pressure he gave up in that entire game. So 1 sack and nothing else going up against that Houston defensive line is actually a really good return for a rookie in particular, right tackle. So, normally you would be heading into this game saying, well, okay, this guy's played pretty well, but he's going up against one of the best defensive fronts in the game. That's an area of weakness or a potential area to be exploited, but at least from what we've seen so far, he's up to it.
And, it's still going to be a challenge with J.J. Watt and Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney, I think I made I don't know if it was here, but I made the comp of JPP for Clowney in recent, somewhere in recent weeks. Maybe a touch better than JPP based off the grading, but JPP at his best was an elite run defender and a good, not great pass rusher. I think that's what Clowney has settled in as so far. I know he's battled injuries and all that stuff, but there's never been a time where you're like, oh, Clowney's a top 3 pass rusher.
Yeah.
But he's very good. And Watt has gotten back to that elite level. Well, he's at the elite level. He's not at J.J. Watt elite level where he was unstoppable and he was in Aaron Donald territory early in his career, but we had him as first-team All-Pro because of his pass rushing, 75 pressures this year. So those guys as a tandem really give the Texans a chance.
Yeah, I think Clowney has developed into the best run-defending edge rusher in the NFL.
Calais Campbell's going to send you a DM on that.
I think the other thing is he's kind of become this Michael Bennett-style player where he's at his best is probably working inside where he uses that sort of physical freak ability and quickness to get inside of tackles, inside of bigger, slower offensive linemen.
Right.
He doesn't really have the speed to kind of turn the edge the way, truly elite speed rushers can at the NFL level. When you move those guys inside and they're still strong enough to get that done, Michael Bennett with his little children's shoulder pads and his quickness has always exposed those guards and tackles inside. And again, it's not necessarily as a pass rusher. He's just able to shoot those gaps and destroy plays in the run game. And that's kind of what Clowney does, is he's still so strong inside. He's more than able to hold up against those guys. And his quickness, just the ability to shoot those gaps and come at them in a different speed that they're expecting, is how he's so devastating as a run defender working from inside. I think that's kind of where he's at his best. JPP, I think, is a good comp. For the reasons he said, he's a better run defender than pass rusher. But I think Michael Bennett is another one as well in terms of kind of usage and how they make their best plays.
Yeah, and then the biggest story I think for the Texans on defense, when we came into the season, we said, look, the Texans, and we'll talk about their offense in a minute, they're weak in the wrong places because the secondary has massive question marks. Yeah, they've got, if Watt gets back to it and Clowney's back to it and Merciless gets back to it, our preseason analysis was like, yeah, sure, they could have a good defensive line, but what about that secondary? They're getting an almost career year from Kareem Jackson. He's had a fascinating career if you just look at PFF grades. There's a whole bunch of average in there, but there's one excellent season in 2014, a very good season in 2012, and now randomly a very good season in 2018 for Kareem Jackson, who started the year at safety and has played more corner, allowed a pass rating of only 75 into his coverage, 10 pass breakups. So Kareem Jackson playing well. Rookie Justin Reed playing well. He makes our all-rookie team as our flex defensive player. Jonathan Joseph, when he's been out there this year, has been pretty solid as well. So this secondary in back seven, Tyrann Mathieu, all these guys that have came in with question marks, they've been solid and essentially I think been one of the keys to the Texans' success.
I think both these defenses are playing at a level, they're outperforming the talent level, but for different reasons. I think the Texans are kind of scheming up a lot of relatively creative and exotic things on the back end. It's enabling these guys to have to outperform the level you would expect from them. Like you said, there's a whole ton of guys that are either having career years or just playing extremely well. Matthew, Kareem Jackson, Jonathan Joseph, bit part players in the secondary as well. And then the linebackers, McKinney, Zach Cunningham, these guys have been playing well.
Cunningham's really come on the second half of the year for sure.
And then the Colts are doing almost the exact opposite. They're basically creating almost the most vanilla scheme you could possibly come up with on the basis that if you eliminate all the thought process and just say, right, this is what you're doing every single play, do it at 100 miles an hour, and more often than not, things will go well. Like, they've been doing that, and it's having the same kind of effect that these guys, everybody knows about Darius Leonard, obviously, who's had a great rookie season, but they're still getting good play out of their defensive front. The Margus Hunt thing that seemed like it could easily be a fluke last year. He's still been playing well. Like, he maybe hasn't been as good as he was a year ago, but Margus Hunt, Danico Autry, Jabal Sheard is still very good. Their front has been playing well. Leonard at linebacker, and then those group of defensive backs. Pierre Desir has had a really good season for them. So I think you're seeing essentially the same thing. The two defenses that on paper have plenty of holes and plenty of questionable talent are dramatically outperforming that because of the coaching jobs, just in completely different styles.
Yeah, I screwed up trying to filter, but they've got the most cover 2 snaps of any team in the NFL, as the cover 2 is not really a thing anymore. It is funny, again, talking to Zach, who does watch every single snap. Actually, the Texans are right up there with the Colts in cover 2 snaps now as a percentage. He was talking about how teams are creatively getting to cover 2, and I don't know if he was just talking about the Rams or not, but there has been a big cat and mouse game with offenses and defenses, I think, in the second half of the season. But regardless, the Colts play a lot of cover 2, cover 3, a lot of zone-heavy schemes where, in today's NFL, when teams are trying to throw the ball short, soft zones are generally conducive to that. But if you have the right playmakers, you can limit big plays, and you have a guy like Darius Leonard in the middle making a ton of big plays for them at linebacker. I mean, he's going to be a key for this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both these teams have been fascinating to watch because of the fact that those schemes are actually having such an impact on the defense. What really intrigues me about this game is this idea of the Houston offense, though. It's Deshaun Watson and Nuke Hopkins and nothing else. That should not be good enough to win games and perform well consistently as an offense, and yet it has been all through the season. It's kind of amazing to watch, and it's hard to identify exactly why that's been so successful. Obviously, the two players in question are really good, so that's part of it.
Just so you know, so from a PFF grade standpoint, Nuke Hopkins, by far the highest grade on the Texans offense, 92.5. Deshaun Watson's number 2 at 82.6. Number 3 is Will Fuller, who is injured and only played 375 snaps. And then number 4 is Lamar Miller at 74.6. He's a running back. Who cares? Beyond that, everybody's in the 60s or lower.
Right. So you got...
And the offensive line is very low.
2 pretty elite guys. Everyone else in the 60s or worse.
Yes. And that includes Julian Davenport, the starting left tackle, at 52.9.
Yeah.
Martinez Rankin, who's played 430 snaps on the O-line at 42. And that's been the story. This O-line grades horribly. And Watson has faced the most pressure in the NFL, some of it on his own, but they've still managed to be productive on offense.
Right. It's kind of ridiculous. Obviously, the fact that those two are very good is part of the reason it's been successful. But even given that, it should be possible to slow down one connection when that's all you have, particularly when the offensive line is that bad. I think Deshaun Watson's ability to move around, scramble, evade pressure, etc., makes it harder still because, you don't just have to deal with covering Nuke Hopkins. You have to deal with when things break down and, the scramble drill starts and you have to adjust and all that kind of thing because Deshaun Watson can take off and make plays in the backfield and running. It's a lot more to deal with as a defense. So that's part of the issue. But this Nuke Hopkins season has been ridiculous.
Yeah, really
He has 159 targets this season, which actually isn't even close to his highest targeted seasons. Like, he's been up, I think, 200 at one point.
Yep.
115 receptions, so that's catching 72.3% of his targets. No drops. That's the highest total we've ever seen over a season with no drops whatsoever. And it's not like these are all routine catches. Like, despite the fact that he has no drops, we have multiple freaky one-handed catches in there. Like, these have been high-level difficulty catches that he's been bringing in despite not dropping anything.
Yeah, it really has been an exceptional year. Highest grade we've given since 2006, tied for the highest grade, right? And then I'm looking at Watson's breakdown here. He has a bunch of games over 70 plus. Those are your solid grades. A few in the 50s and 60s, and 2 disastrous games in there. So he's an 82.6 overall. But, and I hate to do this if you take out 2 games, but just for the sake of argument, if you take out 2 games, he's a high 80s quarterback, which puts him in the top 7 or 8, right? So if you're getting that level of play from Watson, behind a bad offensive line and with only Nuke to throw to, and a revolving door of other guys. First off, I think the future for the Texans looks really good if that's the case, because this offense has to get better talent-wise. But secondly, this is why I think it's going to be a great matchup. Watson can take over a game. Luck is our number 3 quarterback. He could take over a game. This is going to be a shootout.
Yeah, in theory. And it's also it's interesting because with the Colts defense, the thing that's making them successful is that they have been playing this relatively idiot-proof system that doesn't require thinking or adjustment or any of this kind of stuff. But given that the Texans are basically just Watson to Nuke, the game plan playing them should theoretically be to double Nuke every single play and force him to beat you with somebody else, anybody else, doesn't matter. Just take him away, right? It's not that hard to do. We've seen the Patriots, dedicate themselves to stopping one specific player on an offense. It's very possible. Now, Nuke will make some plays anyway because he's that kind of freak, but you can dramatically limit the opportunities he has to make plays. But in order to do that, you have to go away from your vanilla cookie-cutter system that just lets you line up and play. You actually have to change things around and insert some specific things that require thinking and communication and all that kind of stuff. So you would feel that the Colts probably don't want to do that. They just want to ride the horse that brought them there.
Probably.
Which is playing into the Texans' game plan.
Yeah,
because
we'll see if
all they have is Watson to Hopkins.
They'll still probably be forcing him the football. A couple other interesting Watson numbers, too. 60 scrambles. That's times he dropped back to pass and then took off to run.
Yep.
That ties Michael Vick for the most in the PFF era. So that's a huge part of the game. And all of the numbers when he throws the ball outside the pocket, 5 touchdowns and a ton of yards. I mean, he's in the top 2 or 3 in the NFL. So he is one of those quarterbacks. And again, talking to Zach about what he was doing at Clemson, he was a lot of like one read and take off.
Yeah.
But this is 1 read, 2 reads, and then make a play. This is different.
Yeah.
And that has made him really, because when you give him 1 read to throw the ball, he's very good. But now his ability to extend plays, while he always had it in him, he didn't always show it at Clemson, and that's made him really dangerous.
But the other thing is his play under pressure has, or at least his play under pressure has been, I would say, unsustainably productive, only he's been sustaining it for a hell of a long time now. So
you know what is unsustainable? All right. So look, when you look at Watson from a 2-year perspective, his stats are exceptional. Last year we were sitting there saying he hasn't played as well as the stats show. This year would still be the case. His PFF grade's lower than the stats would indicate. I think just the drop rate, he led the league in drop rate for the 2nd straight year.
Yeah.
That is an uncontrollable thing. Of course, you've got Hopkins, right? Padding that.
0 drops from 170-odd targets. So I said it was.
And I know people hate when we do this, but if you just give him a league average drop rate over the last 2 years, which is something he can't control, his passer rating probably drops 8 or 10 points. So he hasn't played as well as the stats have showed. But the under pressure numbers, 88.2 passer rating is also something that could come
So
down.
that's the number 2 passer rating in the NFL behind only Nick Foles, who obviously hasn't had long enough for that to come down. I think that one is a product of volatility and short sample sizes. Deshaun Watson at 88.2, despite being the number 1 pressured quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah.
Like, those things should not intersect. The guy that is pressured the most in the NFL should not have the highest passer rating when pressured. For example, the guy that's number 2 in terms of pressure is Josh Allen, and his passer rating when pressured is 47, which is
that went up.
Like almost dead last.
That went up over the last couple of weeks.
Right. But the point is, the guys that are at the top of the pressured list should not have the highest passer rating.
Right.
So Josh Rosen is number 4. His passer rating is 38. Those guys should not be good at this, but Deshaun Watson seems to be consistently able to do it. I'm sure there's a degree to which this will come down to earth a little bit for no other reason than the PFF grade isn't as good So again, when the grades and the numbers don't match up, typically the numbers will come back down to the grade at some point. So I would suspect his play under pressure comes back down to earth a little bit long term. But at least for the moment, he's able to do it at an incredibly high rate. And a little bit like Russell Wilson, he's kind of at home when he's playing this sandlot, ad-libbing, just make something happen game.
Right.
Like a lot of quarterbacks, that would just be a death sentence to have there. Like, can you imagine Kirk Cousins having to play that way? He said, right, Kurt, drop back. No. There'll be a pressure pretty immediately. Run around, make something happen. Like, it would just be game over.
Well, this
done.
But this is the danger. Do you really want to pressure or do you want to play contain? And I think you have to mix that up because he will take sacks too.
Right. But for Wilson and Watson, I think they're kind of at home playing that game and able to get really good results doing it.
Yeah, and the one final number I'll show, I tweeted out yesterday, the most sacks charged directly to the quarterback. It's Dak Prescott with 15. We'll talk about him in a minute. Deshaun Watson with 14. It's actually all playoff quarterbacks other than Josh Rosen. But so that's 14 times that Watson either left a clean pocket and got sacked, or he dropped back too far and his linemen were blocking for a different pocket and they lost leverage, or he stepped up into a sack. So that's kind of the risk reward when you're coming after Deshaun Watson. You'll get some negative plays in there. If you're looking for him, but he'll burn you, behind the coverage as well. So I think it's a fascinating matchup, even though we've already seen it twice. Watson and Luck on the big stage. It's Watson's first playoff game. I just think we're in for a very fun NFL over the next few years with all these young quarterbacks. Where are you leaning on in this one?
I'm going to go with the Colts. I'm going to ride the hot hand, and I continually am waiting for the wheels to fall off this Texans bandwagon. So this is the chance.
I'm going with the Colts again, or as well. If for nothing else, I trust Luck down the stretch. If this is a close game, as I anticipate it to be, I anticipate a shootout, and Luck has that knack for making things happen in the fourth quarter. Not that Watson doesn't, but Luck's got this history of making plays down the stretch. I think he pulls one out.
Plus the road team's 2-0. I mean,
of course,
road team wins.
That trend,
obviously,
that trend matters a lot.
Yeah.